I think I would define hiring excellence as this. You've created a hiring process that candidates enjoy going through, and it also leads to hiring people that are great value adds to your team. And then, of course, you're always tweaking it for improvements along the way.
Welcome to Offer Accepted, the podcast that elevates your recruiting game. Your host, Shannon Ogborn, interviews top talent acquisition leaders, uncovering their secrets to building and leading successful recruiting teams. Gain valuable insights and actionable advice from analyzing cutting-edge metrics to claiming your seat at the table. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Offer Accepted. I'm Shannon Ogborn, and this episode is brought to you by Ashby, the all-in-one recruiting platform empowering ambitious teams from seed to IPO. I'm here today with the great Leah Knobler, VP of People at Help Scout, previously Director of Talent Acquisition. And might I say, it's just great to see our TA friends get promoted into VP of People role. So congrats on that transition.
Thank you.
To give our audience a little bit of background on yourself, can you tell us a little bit about your role at Help Scout and a little bit about what Help Scout does?
Yeah. So, first, Help Scout, we are a fully remote software company, and we make really great tools for businesses to delight their customers and provide great customer support. And we've been fully remote since the beginning. We've been around for now 12 years. So, I like to think of us as sort of OGs in the space. And then, as you mentioned, I oversee the people function, so manage a team of 8 of us and overseeing all things now TA, total rewards, our business partners, and employee experience.
Amazing. How has that transition been moving from more of the talent side to the overall people side?
You know, I think it's been exciting. I think it's certainly, a big change, but TA I think is such a great breeding ground, so to speak, for holistic people leaders because you really get to, you learn so much and you're thinking about the talent strategically and who you're bringing in. And then it feels like a natural next extension to now think about the experience you're shaping for them once they're here and continuing to oversee that part of the employee journey. And I feel very lucky. I've been at Help Scout. It'll be 8 years in July. So I've had a lot of the context.
That's like 30 in startup years.
Exactly. No, but really. And so I've created and helped shaped a lot of the people programs that still exist, or at least, pieces of them still exist. So getting back to my roots feels kind of great anyhow.
I love that. Well, let's jump into some more TA specific stuff. What do you feel like is one of the most pertinent challenges you've seen come up in your time in the talent space?
Where to begin? I mean, we've been, I want to give every recruiter a hug because I feel like we've been all through just such a roller coaster ride in the past 2-ish years of feeling like we were on fire, untouchable, in high demand, to now the complete opposite pendulum swing. And that's hard. That's really hard. So I just think the challenge right now for recruiters is just trying to, believe that things continue to swing and stay in this line of work if you're really passionate about it. I don't think all of these hiring freezes and will last forever. But yeah, I think it's certainly a challenging time to be a recruiter and to find work and add value if your, company is not doing a lot of hiring.
Totally. And I find myself pretty continuously, I feel like on LinkedIn, I'm like that. I'm that person that's like, a little bit of empathy for recruiting teams, please. A little bit of empathy for recruiting teams, please. And candidates, like, there's a lot to be said about the candidate experience and that, but people will just start blasting everywhere. I'm like, honestly, your recruiter could have been laid off yesterday. Like, you just really don't know. So I'm like, if we could just have a little bit more empathy all around. It's been a really challenging 3 years for recruiting. Like you said, going from like the top of the top to just like slowly kind of coming down and then kind of on the come back up, just crashing straight down. it's been a bit rough, and so I know a lot of our recruiting friends are burnt out mentally, and so and part of the goal of, these chats is to really help rejuvenate that spirit within our talent community and hopefully bring really tactical tips to our talent team so that they can showcase the impact that we know that they have, but that they can showcase to the rest of their leadership team too.
Absolutely. Big ditto to everything.
Cool. Well, I know that we had chatted a lot about sort of the lack of continuous improvement with recruiting teams. And I think the interesting thing and my sort of take is how can we take some of the things that exist in other parts of the business, like sales and marketing, where they're continuously improving and they're always looking at, campaigns and how they performed or deals and if they closed or not. What's your take on this continuous improvement aspect for TA?
Yeah, I really love this topic and that you asked this question. So for us in TA, this started really coming to fruition back in 2020. And I have to give credit to one of our engineering managers at the time, Anwan Simmons, who's now at GitHub. But after we made a VP level hire, started asking some really good questions. He just wanted to sort of understand the behind the scenes and how we landed on the candidate we hired. And it made a lot of sense that someone else across the org would just want to know, like, hey, what happened there? And like, how did we land on that? And so from there, it evolved, and I had several conversations with our CEO, Nick Francis, who's always excited to find new ways to lean into transparency. And we decided it'd be a really interesting practice to just share more information internally after a hire is made and just, really get into how the sausage was made on each hire and share some of the nuts and bolts. And thus, our hiring summary was born at Help Scout.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate the shout outs because, as an organization, hiring can't be done siloed and it can't be done alone. So it's awesome that the team has so much collaboration with other parts of the business. Now, tactically, how did you go about implementing this? Was it kind of a slow roll? Was there a trial period? Was there really any like internal hesitations with sort of like publishing this information to the whole company?
Yeah, great questions. So we just wanted to get going. We just wanted to start. And so, based on some of the questions Anwan had asked, and then a few more, we decided as a team, we put together basically a template for our hiring summaries so that they'd be really easy to recreate and consistent going forward. And at the time, the next hire that we made, we tried it out. And so it became the responsibility of the recruiter, then in collaboration with their hiring manager, to get this hiring summary filled out. And it includes, some of the essential questions that you have to think of before you even hire. So it includes, why did we hire this role to begin with? Like, why were we hiring?
Mhm.
Who was involved in the process? What was that process? And then ultimately, there's a section of like, why did we decide to hire the person we hired? And then there's also, some of the gets into the weeds on some recruiting metrics for the folks that really are interested in seeing the meat. But overall, it's just this great sort of window into who was involved, how did it happen, what did it look like, and ultimately, why did this team make this decision? And they very quickly got such a positive reaction, and there was no hesitation. I think largely because we like transparency so much
Mhm.
as a remote team. So this just felt like a really natural extension out of things we were already doing as a company and in our culture. So it became very, cool very quickly. People were like, "Oh, I can't wait to see the hiring summary for that."
That's so awesome. I was gonna ask because you had mentioned at the beginning that Help Scout has always been fully remote for 12 years, which is, as we all know, very impressively innovative at the time. Do you feel like it's a necessity for especially remote teams to do this, or would you say it's a necessity for all teams?
Yeah, I think so much of what works for a remote company will work for any company. Like
Mhm.
that's the baseline. If you're building for a remote company, it should work anywhere in person, hybrid. So yeah, I would say any team that's doing hiring could benefit from this practice. Hard stop.
100%. Have you seen any changes come within the organization or within the hiring process? Were there any specific examples that really exposed a learning that led to a change in process or a systematic change?
Yeah, I think this is a great one because yes, there's so many things. So first, I think it was just so helpful for the entire company to see how much effort and work goes into hiring when you're
Mhm.
sharing, numbers of applicants and how many candidates you sourced and how long it took. It just really paints the picture for the company to be like, oh, right, recruiters do a lot of stuff and are really helping and making this process happen. And so it just, painted that picture and I think helped people understand, oh, we're hiring the right people. This is great. And we're being really intentional. And so it really built trust, which I think is just a hugely important thing, again, in all
Totally.
companies, but especially remote teams. So it helped build trust. And then soon after we started doing this, I forget who attributed this one, but someone came up with like, you know what, there should be a section at the bottom for learnings. And we loved that. We were like, yes, that's the absolute that makes sense to close out this whole thing. Like, what did we learn? What will we keep in mind for next time? What will we do differently? And that again became like the fan favorite section, I'd say,
Mhm.
because when do you get to see kind of inside the mind of your recruiter and your hiring manager to see like what they thought of the process? Like that never really gets shared with the entire company, right?
Totally.
And there's a lot of learnings there. And that became such a, you know, point to then improve the process next time or, things to just tweak in the future or feedback we received from a candidate along the way. Just, an awesome section. And then I think, for specific examples of what changed as well, the process of doing this really made us look at our data more
Mhm.
frequently. It's one thing to track it, but it's another thing to track it and really, give voice to it and look at it. So one of our senior technical recruiters, Will, who's fabulous, was writing a lot of these and noticed, I'm really noticing it takes us about 90 days plus to hire engineers right now. And, why don't we actually stop and zoom out and look at more at our hiring data holistically, especially since 2020 when things have kind of just changed. I think
Mhm.
any data from before 2020 kind of I throw out the window at this point.
Totally.
Yeah, so he really spearheaded this project to just kind of pause and look at our hiring data that we had been tracking, but just to really spend time doing some analysis on it. And from there, he really looked at engineering to kind of try to solve this problem and make things more efficient and look at pipeline data. And that's where he really identified that candidates were spending a lot of time on our take home project part.
Okay.
And which we knew, right? We knew this would take longer. They have to work on it at home. We give about a week or so. So that's obviously going to add time, but it was taking like a lot longer and overall just making the process take longer. So Will dug even further with hiring managers and really helped everyone streamline this process and revamp the projects, update and clarify expectations for candidates. And then lastly, we brought on a third-party tool called Code Submit that helps kind of send out and organize and track the projects. Hint, hint to add a integration with Ashby. It's not on the list yet, but we're hoping to see it at
Taking
some point.
notes.
Yep, had to plug it. All to say is all of these things absolutely helped bring down time to fill and time to hire for engineering roles. So that was, one tangible outcome from just starting to notice these things in the summaries. It led to uncovering this like whole other project over here to streamline and systematically change our process for the better.
100%. There's two things that come to mind here. One saying that I'm going to completely butcher, so apologies. That's basically like the only failures you have are ones you don't learn from. And
Mhm.
so having this learning section I feel like really amplifies that of saying like, hey, it's okay for us to have missteps. every company does, every team does, but we're actually going to put them in the light so that we
Mhm.
can become better. So I think that's great. And on the data note, I know that you had mentioned that you all were now maybe using some like custom reporting or automated reporting to help create these hiring summaries faster. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I can tell you that's happening. Mary, our recruiting manager, has become our in-house Ashby wizard and has set up some dashboards that pull all the data we like to share for hiring summaries all in one place so that it makes it really easy for any recruiter to then, you know, filter by the job that just closed and it populates all that information. So then they're off to the races to fill out the hiring summary using that. So we're very excited to have Ashby helping us do this and making it a lot smoother.
Honestly, anytime you can have a tool reduce your manual workload, there's so much personable and human interaction required with TA and recruiting. And so anytime you can take that process that shouldn't require a lot of human touch, but oftentimes does, it's really, and I know that recruiters won't think that this is an over exaggeration, it's actually life changing because you don't
Mhm.
have to spend that time on something that is so, you know, that you could spend the time elsewhere really making a big impact with, human touch. So that is that is really awesome. Tell me what else you think is really going great with Help Scout right now in terms of TA and recruiting. Are you all hiring a lot right now? Or are you kind of pausing to and adjusting process? What is that looking like for you all right now?
Yeah, I think like a lot of companies, we are being extremely intentional with hiring right now and only have a handful of open roles at the moment, which is different for us, right? Like
Mhm.
everyone in 21 and 22, we were hiring like gangbusters. But I think what it has allowed for that our very small but mighty TA team has been extremely excited about is a chance to spread their wings into other areas of our people team. You know, we have one recruiter who's working on trying to sort of build out what our playbook should look like for employee resource source groups at Help Scout because we don't have like a firm finalized, strategy on how to launch those and to actually maybe pay the people who lead them. So
Totally.
he's gone down this whole path trying to map that out, which has been really great. And then we have another recruiter who loves AI and he's putting together all these interesting ways to, use AI on the people team and recruiting and is sharing his learnings there. And so yeah, I think it's just been a time to sort of pause and get creative and to think of other ways to keep adding value because I'll say it all day, but I think recruiters have some of the best translatable skills of any
Mhm.
position. And so, the same companies who were desperate to hire recruiters and then laid them off as soon as things, shifted in the economy, I think, well, you just lost out on a lot of folks that probably could have been, reallocated to other things. Especially because hiring is gonna eventually come back. So it's just to me that's silly and short-sighted.
100%, and you really don't wanna get me started on that conversation. Basically, everyone in
Do
my
I? I might.
every everyone in my life has 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 now heard the very, very long-winded, albeit I feel like very accurate, rant about that. One question that just kind of popped into my mind about implementing this hiring summary practice, do you think that a company without this sort of transparent culture could implement something like this? Or what do you think the difficulties would be? Because I'm just thinking, like, say we have someone listening who's like, this sounds amazing to me, right? But like my culture, the culture of the company I work at, it just isn't, people just aren't as bought in, or it's not as collaborative, or there's, a lack of transparency. How would you recommend people go about creating that instead of relying on the culture to create the program?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you start small, right? So maybe it's not as detailed in answering all the things that I mentioned, but after a hire is made, can certainly share some of the data. I think that's a normal practice. I'm sure
Mhm.
even less transparent companies, I'm sure teams are having retros, especially on, engineering product side. And you can always say, in the spirit of this team that's doing this, I thought it would be cool if we did something like that. And, so you're at least setting the stage that this practice happens somewhere. I'm just building on it. You're not creating something new. But then
Right.
again, also with hiring, you're sharing information that's not necessarily hidden, right? Everyone who's at the company got hired. So they went through a process. So they know something. So just reiterating like what it was for this new person isn't groundbreaking, or at least it shouldn't be. And you just start small and you can always just see how people take it and what the reactions are. And then you add layers to it and go from there. That would sort of be my advice.
Amazing. Another question I have is, in terms of retroing, you're obviously retroing for wins because these are folks that you've hired. Do you ever put the information out there or retro for basically what you would consider in other teams like a closed loss? Like, we made an offer to somebody and they declined. Is that sort of information out there?
Yeah, that has happened before, and we tend to include that in the learning section and, for as much for what we can, right? Like there's
Yeah.
always going to be some circumstances whether it's for, privacy's sake or it's just not helpful information to share. But, we have shared previously with engineering hiring when we've made offers to candidates who turned us down because we took too long.
Mhm.
And that was part of, what led to the project, of looking at our hiring processes and where candidates were getting bogged down. So, yeah, I think it's helpful to share some of that too. And again, I think it goes back to building trust, right? You trust people who tell you good things and also bad things. Like if someone's only telling you all the great things that happens to them, you're a little skeptical. And so I think when you also share like, yeah, we fucked that up, or that didn't go well, or we took too long here and we lost out on a great candidate. Like, I think that's also important, and it shows you've learned from it, and you're not gonna do it again. And I think, yeah, I love that kind of thing too.
Agreed. Retroing for loss, I feel like, is almost more important because the learnings are just so exponentially higher. And what I love about candidates is just their brutal honesty sometimes. And when I had previously been at Google and I was hiring for women in tech, we would sometimes have people just say straight up, there's not enough women on this team and I just simply cannot accept an offer on that team. And I'm like, thank you for telling me that because I can, even though the onus isn't on you to do so, what it does is it helps us bring all of that information back to the accountable party for the team and say, hey, just wanted to let you know, like, this is the information we were given, and this is something you should consider. And here's obviously some ways that we can help you get to a better spot here. But I love when candidates give their honest feedback because that it's a critical part to growing.
Yeah, yeah. If you're not soliciting feedback from candidates, I think that's the first thing you should start doing tomorrow.
Right.
But before hiring summaries is, yeah, candidate experience surveys.
Candidate experience surveys, but I have such like a hard time with NPS. I'm like, it's so
Sure.
hard when it doesn't tell. I don't know if your team is gold on NPS at all, but it is such a tough as an individual contributor recruiter, you're like, you get one bad review and you're like, oh, just like jab to the heart. It hurts so bad. And it can really impact your score pretty significantly if it's like
Yeah.
one really bad one, but there's certainly value, especially in the qualitative feedback, which is what I always like
Yeah.
really liked to zoom in on of like, what could I have done better? How can I relay this message to the other folks that maybe like were interviewers or hiring managers and things like that. But yes, data collection is definitely the first step to success there.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, in the spirit of, kind of what we're trying to help folks with who are listening around hiring excellence and really helping people amplify their hiring excellence, which through tactics like you all are using with the hiring summary, companies are getting closer to. I would love to hear, what does hiring excellence mean to you?
Mm. Yeah. I think I would define hiring excellence as this. You've created a hiring process that candidates enjoy going through, and it also leads to hiring people that are great value adds to your team. And then, of course, you're always tweaking it for improvements along the way.
And I love that. I love that all. Succinct, to the point, period, end of story. But what I love about what you just said is that you're talking about add, not fit. In my opinion, it's really important that you're finding people who add to your organization, not fit into your organization. So I think that is can be a really critical piece for companies to ingest and conceptualize add. What can this person add?
Yep. Thank you for noticing that.
It's the small things.
Yeah. But it's a big question, and it's hard, I think, to get it all into one, nice package because there's so many pieces to it. But I just really don't think it's like, yes, you want candidates to enjoy your process, to find it valuable, respectful of their time. But you also really want to make great hires. Like if you are making great hires, but the process sucks, that's terrible. And if,
Yeah.
everyone loves going through your process, but you're not bringing on talent that makes sense or isn't, you know, benefiting your teams in the ways
Yeah,
that you set out to, that's also a problem. So it's really a both and, as I like to say.
absolutely. Okay, moving on to my last and favorite question. What is your recruiting hot take? Like I
Ooh,
said, this we range from mild to sizzling. So pick your poison there and tell us what your recruiting hot take is.
wow. I mean, that could be probably another episode. I'm trying to decide on the spice meter where to go. Well, I mean, it's probably not that hot. I think most people are really bad at hiring. I just think it's really hard, and most people who think they're really great at it probably are the worst.
That is so true though. It's people are like, "Oh, we're doing so amazing." I'm like, eh, you know, it's
Yes.
it's it's tough to convince someone that they're not doing a great job.
Yeah. I don't know how hot this is, but if you're asking candidates to do any kind of project or submit work or present on anything and you're not paying them for their time, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
But maybe at this point that's a given. I'm not sure where we're at with that, but I don't know. Are people paying people for their time in hiring processes these days?
I think it's like incredibly variable. Even, if it's an hour of time and you really consolidate down like a take home where it's like, this should take you 45 minutes to an hour. That's one thing. If you're asking someone to present a full like 30, 60, 90 with a strategic plan,
Mhm.
not to mention that sometimes you don't get the job and then your ideas end up being used and then you see your ideas just like floating
Right.
on the interwebs at
Right.
the company you didn't get the job at and you're kind of like, well, now what the hell? I spent all this time and effort and I get nothing from it and you gained so much. It should feel very. And there's a lot of people who are like, I would do it for free because I enjoy it. I enjoy doing these take home assessments. I feel like it's the best demonstration of my capacity in the role and things like that. But yeah, like you said, it's not equitable to make people do work for free. I also have this very take on internships and unpaid internships. It's
Yes. It's a very similar topic.
like you shouldn't pay. Say you're in college and you're at a university, you have to do an internship. You pay for the internship. You pay for the credits to do the What? No. I'm paying you to work. No. That's
Yeah.
nonsense,
There are a lot of broken things out there, it turns out.
as it turns out. Big surprise.
Now I
Okay,
wanna know what
well,
the hottest take has been. Now I wanna know what's the spiciest on the spice meter.
I guess you'll just
I'll just
have
have to
to
listen, right?
you'll
Okay.
just have to listen to find out. The funny thing though, I think is I think we have a lot of takes on like on remote work. Some people feel very strongly about it. I mean, I work from home. I love it. I think it's great. And some companies are very in office culture, and so and that's what they're sticking to. And so those are the sorts of takes that I find honestly the most entertaining because
Mhm.
it's like there's such difference of thought on that topic specifically. I'm sure you've seen all of the, every day it seems like there's a new CEO being like, "Actually, I think remote work doesn't work." And it's like, "According to who? With what
Right,
data? What is your rationale for this?" Or you just kind of spitball and like, which is what it
right.
feels like. And so, yeah, those are there's some pretty firm hot takes on that, which you know, I love that it's a point of conversation, and I love that people think differently about it.
Yeah. Yeah. As with all things, we're all rich
Exactly.
we're all rich tapestries.
Exactly. Okay, so I think we're coming up on our time here. Where should people go to learn more about you and more about Help Scout?
Probably LinkedIn, because as any former recruiter knows, LinkedIn is our Facebook/Twitter all in one.
The
And,
place.
yeah, so happy to, throw me a follow or reach out. And yeah, check out helpscout.com. We write a lot about our hiring practices and our company culture on our blog.
Awesome. Well, Leah, thank you so much for joining us on Offer Accepted. I really appreciate you spending this time with us today. Hopefully, everyone is able to take what they learned today and bring it to their teams. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Offer Accepted, the podcast for ambitious recruiting professionals, brought to you by Ashby, the all-in-one recruiting platform. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and share with your TA community. We'll see you next time.